What is love in a galaxy that has forgotten the meaning of mercy? What is desire, when the human soul itself is rationed like water in the desert of eternity? They say there was once a time, before the long night, before the great crusade, before the emperor's name was carved into the bones of every world, when love was simple. When two hearts could meet beneath the warmth of a sun and call it sacred. But in the age of the Imperium, suns are no longer warm. They are prisons of light, burning over worlds that have forgotten what it means to feel. In the 41st millennium, love is not a right. It is a relic, an act of rebellion whispered in shadowed corners under the watch of gods and monsters alike. On Hive World Sindara 9, there is no word for dating. There is only pairing, assigned by the Administratum's genetic logs and fertility quotas. Men and women are matched by decree, their compatibility measured not by affection, but by efficiency. Each union is an offering, not to one another, but to the Emperor's endless war machine. They meet for the first time beneath the buzzing of lumens, sign a parchment of binding, and return to their assigned work shifts before the hour is done. Some try to defy it. They sneak glances in the manufactorum, share contraband words of affection during rations, touch hands where the cameras cannot see. But love leaves marks, and in the Imperium, marks are evidence. The penalty for unauthorized intimacy is spiritual contamination. To feel without sanction is to risk corruption, because where love blooms, obsession follows. And in the eyes of the ecclesiarchy, obsession is the garden of heresy. So the Arbites come at night, and the next morning the assembly line runs one worker shorter. Yet, even under the weight of 10,000 laws, humanity endures its most forbidden instinct. On shrine worlds, pilgrims fall in love with the saints whose relics they kiss. On fortress worlds, soldiers etch names into their armor plates, hoping someone, somewhere, will remember them. And on distant agri-moons, where the imperial creed echoes softly through rusted vox hymns, lovers still watch the stars and whisper the same question into the void. What would he think of us if he still watched? For the Emperor is the only constant lover left. Billions kneel before his golden corpse and whisper their devotion into silence, their words carried through incense-thick cathedrals and lost in the drone of sermons. To love another human more than him is blasphemy. To claim a heart that does not belong to the Emperor is theft, of faith, of purity, of purpose. And yet, faith and love share the same root: surrender. In the Schola Progenium, where orphans of war are raised into instruments of discipline, the instructors teach that affection weakens the flesh, dulls the will, and leads to apostasy. They tear away letters, crush childhood attachments, and replace them with holy fervor. But sometimes in the barracks after lights out, two cadets whisper forbidden words in the dark. Sometimes they even dare to hope. A young commissar once wrote in his private journal before his execution, "She smiled when she fired. For a moment I thought it was for me. Perhaps I am already damned." His entries were burned, his name erased from record, but the echo of his thought lingers, as though the galaxy itself remembers. Among the Adeptus Mechanicus, love has no flesh. In the red-lit forges of Mars, emotion is an error code, affection a malfunction. The Mechanicus speak of the Omnissiah's union, the perfect harmony of man and machine, but not of passion between mortals. Some tech priests still recall what it once felt like to yearn, but they suppress it beneath layers of steel and binary prayer. There are rumors, whispers shared between data slaves, of a Magos who fell in love with her creation, a machine so beautiful that she wept oil at its awakening. When her peers discovered the blasphemy, they did not destroy the machine. They destroyed her eyes, so she could no longer look upon what she loved. On the death worlds, love is pragmatic. Mates are chosen for survival, not affection. To love deeply is to invite despair, for death comes swift and without ceremony. On the frozen plains of Vostroya, Soldiers carve their beloved's name into bullets, promising to send them home in spirit if not in body. The Vostroyans call it a final courtship, the moment when love and death become the same thing. But in the Black Ships, where psychers are taken from their homes and condemned to the Emperor's sacrifice, love is pure horror. The psychic senses twist every emotion into pain. When one psyker feels affection, another nearby feels it as burning agony. And so they learn to hate the feeling, to fear it. Some beg to be executed before it returns. Others whisper, trembling, that the Emperor's mercy is the only love they will ever know. Still, there are worlds where love defies the creed. Hidden worlds. Feral colonies lost to the warp, where the Imperium's shadow falls thin and the stars burn unjudged. There, lovers still dance under alien moons, believing themselves forgotten by the galaxy. Free. But freedom in the Imperium is an illusion, and secrets are never safe. When the Inquisition discovers such worlds, it sends its agents cloaked in faith. They call it purification, but what they truly destroy is memory. The people of those worlds vanish. Their love stories turn to ash, their cities to dust. Only a record remains, etched in a data scroll buried deep within the librarium. Emotional contamination. Total. Verdict. Exterminatus. And yet, even in the heart of horror, love takes root like mold in the dark. Among the Sisters of Battle, some whisper prayers not to the Emperor, but to one another. Their bonds are forged through blood and fire, through nights spent listening to the hymns of the dying. They do not speak of it, they cannot. But sometimes their eyes linger too long in the candlelight, and that is enough. It is said that in the siege of Anthelian Gate, 2 sisters held hands as the enemy breached the cathedral walls. They died smiling, their fingers still entwined. The ecclesiarchy calls it martyrdom. The galaxy knows it was love. Then there are the Astartes, the angels of death. To them, the concept of dating, of romance, is alien. Their humanity was stripped away, burned out through indoctrination and genetic transformation. But sometimes in the stillness between wars, fragments remain. A Marine might find himself drawn to a mortal's song, a scent, a memory of a world long dead. He will not understand it, only that something within him stirs, something fragile and unwanted. The chaplains call it the echo of weakness. But perhaps it is not weakness. Perhaps it is the last whisper of what they once were. Because beneath the armor, beneath the gene seed, lies the ghost of a man who once could love. And love, no matter how buried, remembers itself. Across the Imperium, the act of dating, of choosing someone for reasons not recorded by decree, is an act of defiance. It is heresy, yes, but it is also hope. In a galaxy ruled by fear, hope is more dangerous than any demon. And so, the Imperium fights its quietest war not with bolters, but with memory. It burns poems, erases names, forbids songs that once spoke of warmth. Yet, the more it destroys, the more humanity clings to what little is left. A note hidden beneath a bed, a lock of hair sealed inside a reliquary, a single whispered phrase spoken before deployment. Wait for me. Wait for me. In a galaxy where no one returns. Somewhere, on a forgotten hive spire, a man carves a heart into rusted metal. The name inside it is already fading beneath soot and grime, but he traces it again each day before the sirens call him back to work. He knows she was reassigned. He knows he will never see her again. But the ritual remains. The act itself is sacred, a rebellion written in rust. And far above him, on Terra itself, in the endless corridors surrounding the Golden Throne, a custodian walks the silent halls. He passes the murals of humanity's triumphs and tragedies, their colors dulled by centuries of incense smoke. He stops just once before a forgotten fresco. 2 mortals holding each other beneath the Emperor's gaze. The image is cracked, half buried beneath new layers of devotion. He lingers. He should not, but he does. In the reflection of his golden helm, the painted lovers seem almost alive. And for the briefest moment, he wonders what it would have felt like to be human, to love, to be loved. But the thought passes, like a ghost slipping through eternity. Because in the Imperium of Man, love does not live, it hides. And sometimes, in the quiet between the prayers and the gunfire, you can almost hear it breathe, a heartbeat echoing through the cathedrals of the damned, a memory that refuses to die, and somewhere, deep beneath the layers of devotion and fear, a secret waits to be uncovered, a truth too dangerous for any mortal tongue to speak aloud, because in the heart of the Imperium, something ancient still remembers what it means to love, and it's beginning to wake. The awakening began as a whisper in the dark, a flicker in the void between stars. The astropaths called it interference, the priests called it divine resonance, but to those who listened long enough it sounded like breathing. Ancient, patient, human. On the world of Sindara 9, where the manufactorums never slept, the hum of the machinery faltered for the first time in 1,000 years. 1,000,000 servitors froze mid-motion, heads twitching toward the ceiling as though hearing something only they could understand. A single word echoed through the Vox relays before silence consumed all channels. Remember, in the basilicas, priests fell to their knees. They called it a sign, a benediction from the emperor himself. Sermons swelled with fevered joy, hymns thundered across the hives, and the faithful wept oil and blood. But not all who heard believed. In the shadows beneath the altars, a low-ranking confessor named Malchion whispered a heresy too quiet for parchment. What if the voice is not his, but hers? Heresy has a scent, incense and fear. The Ordo Hereticus arrived within a week, their gunmetal ships blotting out the sun. They spoke little, their faces hidden beneath masks of sanctified steel. Whole sectors were locked down. Entire congregations vanished overnight. Yet even as bodies burned, the whisper persisted. It traveled through the Vox, through the walls, through dreams. On the front lines of the Adrantis Crusade, the 122nd Cadian Regiment heard it too. In the lull between bombardments, when the dust settled and the wounded moaned in the trenches, soldiers swore they could hear someone humming beneath the thunder. A melody. Fragile. Human. It reminded them of something they couldn't name. When the commissar demanded silence, they obeyed. But later that night he dreamed of a woman's voice singing from the ashes. The priest said it was a test of faith. The psychers said it was the warp. The soldiers said nothing at all. They simply fought harder, as if trying to drown the sound in blood. In the cathedrals of Terra, the High Ecclesiarch convened the Synod of Seven. The topic, the voice. Some argued it was the emperor's rebirth, others that it was a demon clothed in memory. One cardinal, ancient and blind, declared that it was neither. "The emperor does not speak," he said. "He dreams, and we are the nightmare he cannot wake from." The chamber fell silent. The next day the cardinal's chair was empty, his name erased. Across the Imperium, paranoia became scripture. Lovers who whispered in private found their words distorted, their affection twisted by static. Vox recordings of the voice spread like plague data, each one slightly different. Some spoke of mercy, others of grief. A few murmured a single phrase that terrified even the Inquisition. "He loved you once." On the forge world of Lathra Mechanis, the Magos Dominus dissected the signal with cold precision. What he found shook even the logic engines. Buried within the waveform was a pattern older than binary, older than Mars itself, a human heartbeat. It pulsed between transmissions, faint but undeniable. The Magos sealed the discovery, transmitting it directly to Terra. The next morning, his forge erupted in flames. Official records list it as reactor malfunction. Inquisitor Atheon of the Ordo Maleos was the first to connect the dots. The voice appeared only on worlds where love, True, unsanctioned love had been punished. Every planet, every city, every cathedral haunted by the whisper had once destroyed something beautiful in the Emperor's name. He called it the wound of humanity. His colleagues called it blasphemy. Within a month, Atheon disappeared. Some say he was silenced. Others say he listened too closely, and the voice answered back. Far from Terra, in a dying system of red suns, a single space marine stood vigil over a tomb world. Brother Sergeant Kalis of the Ultramarines watched the stars as if waiting for orders that would never come. The whisper reached him too, faint through his helm, like a memory from another life. It spoke his name. No one had done that since his ascension. The voice said, "Before you were an angel, you were a man." His heart, long thought dead, remembered its first beat. Kalis reported the anomaly. His chaplain ordered penance. But as Kalis knelt in the chapel, the candles around him dimmed and flared as though the air itself was weeping. He saw faces in the smoke, millions of them, human and sorrowful. They mouthed the same word again and again: remember. When the light returned, the chapel was empty, and Kalis' armor bore a new mark, a handprint, pressed into ceramite from the inside. Meanwhile, on Sindara 9, Confessor Malchion's whispers spread through the lower hive. He spoke of a love that predated the Imperium, of a promise between gods now buried beneath gold and lies. The people listened, desperate for warmth in a world of steel. His sermons ended with a single forbidden prayer: "If he cannot love us, let her remember us." The Arbites raided his shrine within the week. They found nothing but ash, and the faint sound of a woman weeping through the vox. In the imperial palace, the custodes heard the rumors but dismissed them as madness. Yet some nights, when the static crawled through the vox net, they too paused. One among them, Aurelian, a warden of the throne itself, claimed to hear something beneath the mechanical hum of the golden throne. A second pulse, softer, almost maternal. When he reported it, the sigillite priests sealed the chamber for maintenance. It was never opened again. The administratum's data logs began to show strange anomalies. Birth rates fluctuated. Psyker manifestations increased. On one world, children were born with memories of people they had never met. They spoke of places that did not exist and cried when shown the image of the Emperor. "He forgot us," they said, "but she remembers." A new sect emerged, hidden among the pilgrim fleets. They called themselves the Remnants of the Heart. They worshipped neither Emperor nor Chaos. Instead, they spoke of a third presence, the echo of humanity, the mother of memory. Her symbol was simple: a hand clutching a heart of broken glass. The ecclesiarchy declared them heretics. But for every shrine burned, 2 more rose from the ashes. On the frontier world of Helios Prime, the 38th Elysian Drop Troop prepared for war against an uprising. But when they arrived, they found no rebels, only pilgrims singing beneath the ruins. The songs were soft, beautiful, filled with longing. The commander ordered fire. His troops hesitated. Some dropped their weapons. The commander shot one himself to restore order, but before the next volley a sound rolled through the air, a low, resonant heartbeat that made the earth tremble. The entire regiment fell to their knees, not in fear, but in awe. The commander looked up, and for the first time he saw the sky bleed light, red and gold, like the heart of a dying star. From within it came a whisper that drowned the world. "He forgot what love was. I did not." Then the light vanished. The planet went silent. No transmission ever escaped its orbit again. When word reached Terra, panic rippled through the ecclesiarchy. The high lords of Terra convened in secrecy. Reports of manifestations spread across half the segmentum solar. Entire sectors prayed to both him and her. The idea was unthinkable. A second divine. Theologians debated, inquisitors hunted, psychers screamed. and through it all the voice grew stronger. In a requiem on Voss, a dying priest recorded his final confession. "I served all my life," he whispered, "but when I prayed, I felt nothing. Last night," she answered, she said, "He is not gone. He is sleeping, and she keeps his dreams." The recording ends with silence, then the faint sound of a heartbeat, steady and infinite. The Mechanicus attempted to trace the source of the phenomenon. They triangulated a pattern leading to the ruins of Luna's first colony dome, abandoned since the Great Crusade. Deep within the dust, beneath collapsed sanctums and the bones of forgotten martyrs, they found a sealed vault. Its sigil bore the mark of the Emperor himself, and beside it, another symbol, erased so carefully that only the faint outline of a woman's face remained. The vault opened only once. Those who entered never returned. The next day, the moon's seismic readings changed, a rhythmic vibration, like something vast and buried beginning to stir. Inquisitor Atheon's last surviving message surfaced in the data stream of an astropathic relay, encrypted and fragmented. His voice trembled through the static. "The voice is not a threat. It is a memory. The Emperor is not alone. She was with him before the throne, before the wars, before the dream of the Imperium. They built it together, faith and love. But when he rose to godhood, he forgot her. And now, she remembers." The message cut off mid-sentence. The relay burned itself out seconds later. On Terra, beneath the vaults of the palace, the custodian Aurelian walked once more past the fresco of the lovers. The image was different now. The Emperor's gaze no longer fell upon the galaxy, but upon the woman at his side. Her face, once faded, now glowed faintly in the candlelight. Aurelian turned, his heart cold. The silence of the palace seemed heavier, alive with unseen breath. Then he heard it, faint, echoing through marble and gold. The same whisper carried from world to world, life to life. He is not the only one who remembers. The candles went out. The throne shuddered. And somewhere deep within the machinery of eternity, something ancient opened its eyes. Across the stars, the Imperium trembled. Vox networks screamed with static and prayer, supply lines vanished into silence, and the Astronomicon, the Emperor's sacred light, flickered like a dying candle. For the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy dreamed of darkness. On Sindara 9, the manufactorums burned for 40 days and nights. The voice echoed through every lumen and engine coil, turning command systems into choirs of sorrow. Workers abandoned their stations to kneel before the flames, murmuring the same name, her. The Arbites fired until their barrels melted, but still the crowd sang. By dawn, half the hive was ash, the other half on its knees. In the orbit above, the Imperial Navy debated bombardment. The admirals argued doctrine, not conscience. To them, worlds were currency, not sanctity. But one officer, Captain Lysander Holt, refused the order. "You can't kill a song," he said. His crew executed him for treason before firing on the planet anyway. The bombardment erased Sindara 9, yet the song endured. Astropaths across 3 sectors heard it rise from the void, woven into the scream of dying worlds. Some said it was a haunting, others said it was prayer. The Ordo Malleus declared it contagion, but no purgation could silence it. On the shrine moon of Tharsis Ultima, where pilgrims once came to kiss the Emperor's sigil, the ecclesiarchy tore down every fresco depicting mortal love. "Her memory must be purged," they proclaimed. Yet, as the paintings burned, some saw the pigments bleed like living veins, the figures twisting toward one another through smoke. Priests began to collapse mid-sermon, clutching their chests as if remembering what hearts were for. The Schola Progenium doubled its indoctrination. Children were forbidden to dream unsupervised. They were told that love was the seed of sin, that the Emperor's devotion was all they needed. But one girl, 10 years old, wept during confession. When asked why, she whispered, "Because he forgot my name." The confessor reported her for corruption. That night, the entire dormitory burned. The cause was listed as electrical failure. On the front lines of the Adrantis Crusade, the Cadian 122nd fought without rest. But discipline eroded under the weight of silence, the kind that settles after faith dies. They no longer shouted for the Emperor. They fought for survival, for each other, for ghosts they couldn't name. Commissars executed hundreds to preserve order, yet the ranks still sang between volleys, low hymns, half-remembered lullabies. When the enemy advanced, they held the line, not for glory, but because dying together felt closer to love than living alone. High above, Inquisitor Celine Vira watched through tactical augurs. She had seen too much to believe in coincidence. The voice appeared not as heresy, but as symmetry, a pattern threading through the fabric of faith itself. Every world it touched shared one sin. They had erased tenderness in the name of purity. She began to wonder if the Emperor's silence was not divine, but penance. The Inquisition branded her apostate before her report reached Terra. She fled into the black, taking only a single relic, a data slate encoded with an ancient script, one that predated the Lectitio Divinitatus. The title, scratched into iron, The Covenant of Two. On the forge, world of Lathra Mechanis, the machines began to weep. Coolant lines ran red. Vox units sang psalms without input. The Magi dissected their own creations searching for the fault, but what they found instead was impossible: emotion. Cogitators output phrases of longing and loss. A single word repeated across every circuit. Her. The Mechanicus quarantined the world, then bombarded it from orbit. When the flames cleared, the signal spread faster than before. Meanwhile, on Terra, the custodian Aurelian stood before the throne. The Emperor's body remained as it always had, still, golden, eternal. Yet the psychic hum that once filled the chamber had changed. It pulsed, slower now, heavier, as though bound to another rhythm. Aurelian approached closer than any dared. Beneath the mechanical roar of life support, he heard it, a second heartbeat, faint but deliberate. He fell to his knees. "My lord," he whispered, "what is this?" The air itself answered, cold and sorrowful. Memory. Across the palace, Vox lines failed. Servitors turned to face the throne as one, heads tilted, lips moving without sound. In the distant chambers of the Astronomicon, the Psychers screamed in unison, visions flooding their minds of two figures standing at the dawn of humanity, one crowned in light, the other veiled in shadow. They were not enemies. They were intertwined. The High Lords convened in secret once more. The Ecclesiarch demanded silence. The Inquisition demanded blood. Some argued for denial, others for war. But none dared voice the truth that now whispered in every soul, that the Emperor might not be alone upon his throne. That divinity was never meant to be solitary. Wars erupted between sects almost overnight. The remnants of the heart, once a fringe cult, became an empire of faith. Pilgrim fleets defected. Cardinal worlds fell to schism. They called themselves the Children of Memory, claiming they sought not rebellion, but reunion, to restore what the Imperium had severed. Their banners bore the symbol of two hearts bound by chains of gold. The ecclesiarchy answered with fire. Cathedral cities turned to ash. Pilgrims were executed by the thousands. Yet for every pyre another hymn rose from the smoke. He forgot love. She remembers us all. In the depths of space, Celine Vira finally decrypted the Covenant of Two. It was not a prayer. It was a record, a conversation between the Emperor and another being before the age of strife. The text spoke of a pact. He would bear the burden of reason. She would guard the flame of emotion. Together they would preserve humanity's soul. But when he took the mantle of godhood, he sealed her away. Not in malice, but in fear. for he had seen what love could do to gods. Vyra's hands trembled. The voice was not new. It was awakening. The second half of creation itself was returning. She transmitted fragments of her findings across the void before her ship vanished into the warp. Some say the voice consumed her. Others say she spared her. Back on Terra, the throne's mechanisms began to falter. Power fluctuations surged across the palace, and the Astronomicon dimmed to a faint ember. The Mechanicus pleaded for access to repair, but the custodes denied all entry. Aurelian alone remained, listening to the twin heartbeats grow louder. Outside, the people of Terra gathered in the streets, praying without instruction. They did not ask for victory or salvation. They asked for forgiveness. The first tears in generations fell upon marble once thought too sacred for weakness. In the midst of that silence, a light unlike any other flared from the golden dome, not the sterile brilliance of divinity, but the warmth of something human. Every soul on Terra felt it. Some fell in ecstasy, others in terror. And then came the visions. The Emperor, not as a god of war, but as a man of grief, standing before a woman shrouded in shadow, her hand upon his cheek. They were not enemies, but exiles from one another. The image burned itself into every mind. The ecclesiarchy called it demonic deception. The people called it truth. Entire worlds turned against their governors. Regiments refused to fire upon civilians. Even the Astartes began to fracture, some claiming to feel emotions long buried beneath gene seed and oath. One chapter, the Sons of Resonance, laid down their arms, declaring that war without love was a sin. The Imperium erased their existence within a day, but rumors persisted that they had joined the remnants among the stars. Aurelian, standing before the throne, heard a voice not of command but of sorrow. "They were never meant to worship me," it said. "They were meant to remember us." He felt his faith collapse like a cathedral gutted by fire. All his life he had served perfection, obedience, silence. But now he saw that the Imperium's greatest sin was not cruelty. It was forgetfulness. The second heartbeat quickened. The light of the throne flared crimson and gold. The machinery screamed. For the first time in millennia, the Emperor's head moved, just slightly, as if in response to something unseen. Every psyker in the galaxy convulsed at once. The Astronomicon shattered into a web of radiance, not fading, but splitting. Twin beacons burning across the warp. The first, cold and sharp, the Emperor's light. The second, warm and sorrowful, hers. The warp did not rage. It listened. And from its depths, something vast began to stir. Not a demon, not a god, but a memory older than either. The stars themselves seemed to pause. On every world, hearts beat in unison. Humans, mutants, psychers, even servitors. All felt the same pulse, the same ache. Love, grief, remembrance, spreading like infection. Then came the silence. Aurelian looked up at the throne one last time. The Emperor's eyes, long dead, now glowed faintly, not gold, but amber. And within them, for the briefest instant, he saw her reflection. The realization struck him like holy fire. The Emperor was not dying. He was becoming two again. A new dawn, or the final heresy. The light consumed the chamber. Vox lines across the Imperium transmitted a final message before burning out. A voice, neither male nor female, both divine and human, spoke only one phrase. The age of one is over. And as the galaxy held its breath, the stars began to pulse in rhythm, like the heartbeat of something reborn. Across the void, the twin lights burned, gold and crimson, and the galaxy convulsed as if awakening from a millennia-long nightmare. Fleets vanished into silence. Astropathic choirs bled from their eyes. Worlds once bound by doctrine began to fracture like glass beneath the weight of revelation. The Imperium, built upon obedience and denial, found itself staring into the eyes of its own forgotten heart. On Terra, storms of dust swept through the ruins of devotion. Pilgrims knelt before the dawn that wasn't dawn, their hymns trembling between worship and fear. The ecclesiarchy's bells tolled without command, their voices cracking under the strain of uncertainty. In the catacombs beneath the palace, the custodes sealed the gates as tremors rolled through marble halls once thought eternal. Aurelian stood before the golden throne, watching the twin lights pulse behind the emperor's form. Machinery screamed as if resisting resurrection. The air stank of ozone and sanctified oil, and he felt for the first time the warmth of divinity that wasn't cold or cruel, but alive. Yet duty chained him. He raised his halberd, unsure whether to defend or destroy what was being born. Above Terra, fleets repositioned in silence. The Admiralty demanded answers. None came. Some captains prayed to both lights, unable to decide which one meant salvation. Others turned their guns toward one another. Faith turned inward like a knife. In orbit over Mars, the Mechanicus transmitted a single phrase to all loyal worlds. The machine god has two voices. Within hours, Mars burned. On the war fronts, soldiers fought under broken banners. Entire regiments refused orders, claiming to fight for her memory instead of his will. Commissars executed hundreds, but still the ranks marched on. Not for obedience, but for meaning. Every death seemed to echo louder, as though the warp itself was listening. The smell of burned flesh and incense became indistinguishable. The Sisters of Battle on Ophelia VII locked themselves within their convents. For days they sang hymns that twisted into lamentations. Their canoness, kneeling before a shattered altar, pressed her blade into her own heart and whispered, "He was never alone." The echo of her death cry spread through the Vox like a litany of release. By dawn, every cathedral bell had stopped ringing. On a dying ship adrift in the Segmentum Pacificus, Inquisitor Selene Vira awoke from stasis. Her body was failing, but her mind burned with clarity. The covenant of two was not prophecy. It was warning. Love, unbound by control, could either redeem the species or consume it. The Emperor's silence had been a seal, and now the seal was breaking. She reached out to the warp and saw visions in layers. Terra in flame, the Astronomicon collapsing into twin beacons, humanity weeping not from terror but remembrance, and, at the heart of it all, two figures, one radiant, one shadowed, reaching for each other across a gulf of faith. When their hands met, the stars themselves screamed. Vira knew what it meant. Not reunion, but consequence. Meanwhile, in the ruins of Sindara 9, survivors clawed through ash and glass, following the faint echo of a heartbeat deep beneath the planet's crust. They found a structure, black stone, older than any record. Inside, the air shimmered with a presence that felt both maternal and infinite. A voice, gentle yet unyielding, whispered from the dark, "They chained me with worship. They feared the warmth that made them human." One survivor fell to his knees. "Are you her?" he asked. The silence that followed felt like tears made of light. When it spoke again, it was not answer, but invitation. "Will you remember what they tried to forget?" By morning, the survivors were gone. In their place, the ground pulsed faintly like a heartbeat beneath the dust. On Terra, the Emperor's throne flickered violently. Power conduits ruptured. Tech priests screamed binary hymns as entire circuits overloaded. The Astronomicon wavered, then split entirely. Two lights burning side by side, neither stronger, neither yielding. The warp roared not with madness, but recognition. Demons bowed their heads and wept molten tears. The High Lords of Terra argued amidst collapsing walls. Some demanded total annihilation of the new faith. Others confessed that they had already begun to hear her voice in their dreams. "If she is mercy," one said, "then perhaps he was never meant to be eternal." A gunshot ended his heresy. The council dissolved into silence, and the chamber lights went out. Across the galaxy, entire systems declared themselves worlds of reunion. They painted their cathedrals in twin colors, gold and crimson, and prayed for a balance they did not understand. The ecclesiarchy branded them apostates, but the fleets sent to destroy them never returned. Astropathic records show only fragments: laughter, song, and the sound of a heartbeat larger than any sun. Brother Sergeant Kalis of the Ultramarines walked alone through the ruins of Anthelian Gate. His armor, cracked and scorched, bore the mark burned into him months before, the handprint pressed from within. He heard both voices now, one commanding, one forgiving. They intertwined until he could no longer tell which was divine and which was human. "If this is heresy," he murmured, "then let me burn as a man." When his brothers found him, he was kneeling before a small shrine, two halves of a broken Aquila rejoined by his own blood. They shot him without hesitation. Yet in the silence that followed, one of them began to weep without knowing why. The galaxy spiraled toward something vast and final. Faith, once a weapon, became a wound. Those who clung to the old creed did so with desperation bordering on madness. Those who followed the new light found no peace, only reflection. For love in this age was as terrifying as hate. On the fringes of the segmentum obscurus, a fleet bearing the sigil of the Inquisition encountered a celestial anomaly, a sphere of energy pulsing like a living heart. Inside, entire worlds drifted as if held in stasis. The Admiral hesitated. His astropaths heard two voices intertwined, whispering in harmony. "Do not fear the truth of what you are." The Admiral ordered retreat. His ship was never seen again. Aurelian stood in silence as Terra trembled. The twin lights above the throne grew brighter, bleeding into one another until color itself began to fade. He thought of every oath he had sworn, every heretic he had slain, every whispered doubt he had buried beneath faith. And he wondered if his entire life had been service to a lie, or to a truth too vast for loyalty to comprehend. The air thickened. Golden dust fell from the ceiling like the remnants of a dying sun. The Emperor's chest rose slightly, a motion so small it could have been imagined. But the second heartbeat answered. Aurelian fell to his knees as warmth flooded the chamber. Not divine wrath, but something far more unbearable. Compassion. All across Terra, the people screamed and prayed as one. The twin lights merged, their glow turning the skies to liquid fire. Statues cracked, cathedrals crumbled. But amidst the ruin, something impossible took shape. The sound of two voices speaking together. It was not command, not judgment, but recognition. "Forgive us," Aurelian whispered. "We forgot what it meant to be whole." The machinery of the throne reached its limit. Sparks rained down like meteors. The Emperor's eyes opened, faint, human, full of unbearable sorrow. And beneath the palace, in a chamber sealed since the dawn of empire, a single pulse of crimson light answered him. Somewhere deep within the warp, stars shifted. The great currents changed direction, bending around a presence that had been gone for 10 millennia. For the first time since the Age of Strife, the Imperium was silent, watching. On the last transmission before Terra's Vox went dark, a single sentence was recorded by the Adeptus Astra Telepathica. "The two have remembered one another." The message spread like wildfire through the Imperium before the lines burned out. Fleets turned homeward. Armies stopped mid-battle. Every human soul, soldier, priest, psyker, child, felt the same impossible truth shudder through their bones. Something was coming. Not salvation, not damnation, something older, and as the twin lights over Terra began to pulse in perfect rhythm, the galaxy felt time itself hesitate. The breath before the storm, the pause before creation decides whether to end or begin again. And in that breathless silence, every prayer, every sin, every forgotten act of love hung suspended, waiting for the next heartbeat to decide what humanity would become. It began as a whisper, a sound like a prayer unspoken, trembling between the stars. Then came the light, not of fire or faith, but of remembrance. Terra was burning. The Astronomicon, the heart of the Imperium, flared with a brilliance that stripped color from the void. Ships went blind. Worlds thought it was the end. And perhaps it was. The twin lights merged above the throne, forming a singular brilliance that defied the Mechanicus equations and the Ecclesiarchy's faith. Every choir screamed. Every psyker collapsed. Across 1,000 sectors, humanity saw visions, faces they could not name, hands reaching from beyond the veil. It was as if every memory, every sin, every moment of love was being dragged to the surface of creation. In the shattered sanctum of the throne, Aurelian knelt as the Emperor stirred. The room was collapsing. Golden armor cracked, veins of light spreading across the corpse that ruled mankind. The air tasted like burning incense and blood. Aurelian raised his halberd, not in defiance but in surrender. He whispered, "Father, forgive me. I have served your shadow." A voice, not spoken but felt, rippled through the chamber. "You served what remained, but not what I was." The words cut deeper than any blade. They carried sorrow, not judgment, regret, not wrath, and Aurelian understood. The Emperor had never been a god. Humanity had made him one to survive its own emptiness. The custodes outside the chamber fought among themselves. Some saw the blinding light as corruption, a demonic deception. Others fell to their knees, crying in joy that their master had returned. Gold and red armor clashed in sacred corridors. Bolters thundered where prayers should have been. Each blow was an argument of faith written in flesh. From orbit, the void erupted with civil war. Battle barges turned on their brothers. Inquisitorial fleets declared exterminatus on loyal worlds. The Schola Progenium was set ablaze by its own chaplains. Across 1,000 sectors, humanity was no longer united by faith, but by confusion. And yet, amidst the ruin, something else began to rise. The lost voice, the one whispered through dreams and forbidden hymns, the voice of her. On Sindara 9, the survivors gathered around the pulsing stone heart they had found beneath the surface. It cracked open, releasing a figure of light and dust. She wore no armor, bore no crown, yet her presence silenced the wind. The soldiers fell to their knees, weeping without knowing why. She looked skyward, toward Terra, and whispered, "He remembers." The warp convulsed. Entire demon worlds shuddered, their rulers screaming as their power bled away. The Chaos Gods watched, not with fury, but fear, for this was not a new god rising. It was the return of something that predated them, the union of love and sacrifice, the human soul, unbroken. Aurelian watched as the Emperor's eyes opened fully. The light behind them was not divine fire. It was recognition. He reached out, fingers trembling, as if he too feared what came next. The air thickened, reality bending. From the cracks in the marble floor, roots of light spread outward, burning through metal and prayer alike. Then came her light. Crimson, radiant, sorrowful. It met the gold like two rivers merging after an eternity apart. The palace shook. The throne screamed. The Astronomicon imploded into silence. For the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy went dark. But within that darkness something began to breathe. Across the Imperium, every soul felt it. The heartbeat. Not the mechanical pulse of a dying god, but the rhythm of something vast and alive. A child on a mining world lifted her head and smiled. A dying guardsman stopped screaming and whispered, "She's here." On every world, in every ruin, candles reignited themselves. Aurelian could barely see. His armor was melting from the radiance. The Emperor's body rose from the throne, no longer a corpse of gold but a man wrapped in living flame, and beside him, emerging from light and memory, came her, the mother, the forgotten half of humanity's soul. She did not speak. She did not need to. He turned to her, voice breaking the silence. "You shouldn't have come." "I was never gone," she said, and the galaxy trembled. The throne's machinery shrieked, unable to contain the convergence. Energy flooded the chamber, light becoming matter, memory becoming flesh. Outside, the void was splitting open. Stars flickered, constellations rearranging into patterns unseen since before the Age of Strife. Aurelian's vision blurred. He saw the Emperor's face, weary, human, no longer infinite. He saw her reach for his hand. For one terrible, beautiful moment, the universe held its breath. Then the two touched. The explosion tore through reality. Terra vanished in a halo of light. The psychic shockwave rippled across the galaxy, shattering warp gates, silencing demons, erasing entire heresies from existence. Ships vanished mid-void. Planets lost their gravity. Time folded, and for a fraction of eternity the galaxy became one thought. We remember. Then came silence. When the light receded, the throne was gone. Where it had stood was now a crater of molten marble, and at its center a single figure, Aurelian, alive but changed. His armor was fused to his skin, his eyes glowing with both light and shadow. Around him lay the ruins of the sanctum, smoldering with divine residue. He looked up and saw the sky. No longer gold, no longer crimson, but pale white, calm, unbroken. Across the stars, humanity awoke to the aftermath. The Astronomicon was gone. Warp travel faltered, but the storms of madness had ceased. The warp was still, not empty, but quiet. The voices, the screaming, the hunger, all silenced. For the first time in history, the Imperium slept. Pilgrims wandered through the ruins of cathedrals, not knowing what to worship. The ecclesiarchy burned its own books, declaring new dogma born from ash. The Adeptus Mechanicus fell into schism. Some declared the Omnissiah fulfilled, others claimed blasphemy beyond comprehension. But among the common people, the miners, the soldiers, the orphans, something else took root. Hope, not the kind born of faith, but of memory. They spoke not of the emperor or the mother, but of them, the two who remembered. And they built shrines, not to gods, but to love, to the idea that even in a galaxy consumed by war, something once lost could still return. Aurelian wandered the ruins of the palace alone. His body burned with purpose not his own. He could hear both voices now, one urging him to rebuild, the other to rest. He carried both like burdens and blessings. When he reached the crater's edge, he saw the outline of two figures burned into the stone. Side by side, hand in hand. He fell to his knees and wept. The stars above shimmered faintly like eyes half open in sleep. Across the void, strange phenomena began to appear. Planets glowing faintly in twin colors, dead suns reigniting, lost ships returning with no memory of where they had been. The galaxy had changed. It no longer belonged to the God-Emperor alone, nor to chaos, nor to man. It belonged to something older. The balance of two halves rejoined. In the halls of the Inquisition, silence reigned. Inquisitor Vira's final message was recovered from the wreckage of her ship. It contained a single phrase. He remembered her name. No one knew what it meant, but they sealed it away, fearful of its power. On Sindara 9, the crimson light faded, leaving behind only dust. But beneath the ash, the planet's core beat slowly, endlessly, a heart that would never stop. The few who returned to the surface swore they heard whispers in the wind. Remember what you were. And in the immensity of space, where Terra once shone, a new light flickered, faint, uncertain, yet alive. It pulsed like a heartbeat, marking the rhythm of something reborn. No one knew if the Emperor lived, or if she endured, but the galaxy could feel them both, not as gods, but as echoes, as memory, as the promise that even in the darkest millennium, love and ruin are the same flame. And as the light spread, slow and steady across the void, the silence became a kind of prayer, a prayer without words, a prayer without war. For the first time in 10,000 years, humanity did not kneel. They looked up, and the stars, cold, ancient, watching, looked back. Something eternal had shifted, but what it would become, no one dared to name. And so it ended, not in fire, nor thunder, nor the triumph of gods, but in silence. The kind of silence that feels like the breath between heartbeats, the pause before remembrance becomes myth. Where Terra once burned with divine radiance, now hung only a wound in the stars, rimmed with a faint shimmer that no augur could name. The void had swallowed the cradle of mankind, leaving nothing but whispers carried by light years of memory. Aurelian walked through the ruins of a palace that no longer existed. Dust fell where gold once gleamed, and the air was heavy with the ghosts of devotion. The throne was gone, yet the chamber endured, its foundations fused to time itself, an echo carved into eternity. He traced his hand across the stone, and for a moment the warmth returned, the lingering pulse of what had once been love, what had once been him. He no longer knew if he served the Emperor or the memory of the man beneath the god. The galaxy would never know either. All records, all scripture, all logic had burned away in the light that consumed everything. What remained were stories, passed from one trembling soul to another, half prayer, half warning. Some claimed he had ascended beyond the stars, unbound from flesh, now watching over humanity with both mercy and grief. Others said he and she had become one, the divine equilibrium restored, the two halves of creation sealed in the heart of the warp, protecting mankind through silence rather than command. But there were others still, quieter and more human, who said simply that they had died for love, and that such a thing was miracle enough. The Imperium without its emperor was a body without breath. The high lords vanished. The Inquisition turned upon itself, burning truths too dangerous to preserve. The ecclesiarchy renamed itself the Keepers of the Last Dawn, no longer preaching salvation, but remembrance. Their cathedrals stood roofless, their altars open to the stars. Pilgrims came not to beg for mercy, but to sit in the ruins and listen, to the wind, to the silence, to the faint pulse that still trembled beneath their feet. The Astronomican's death threw the galaxy into darkness. Fleets drifted, isolated, lost between dead suns. Yet something strange happened in that blindness. Worlds began to speak to one another not through the warp, but through patience, through survival. Trade routes formed again by instinct, by trust. People began to rebuild not in his name, but in their own. Humanity, unchained from divinity, stumbled into its own reflection, and found it beautiful in its imperfection. On distant worlds, children were born with dreams they could not explain. They spoke of golden skies and crimson oceans, of two figures walking hand in hand through the void. They said the universe was healing itself, and that every wound left behind by faith was becoming something else, memory, myth, meaning. Some priests called them prophets, others called them cursed, but all who heard them wept, for in their innocence was something the Imperium had long forgotten, hope without conquest. Aurelian remained where Terra had been, orbiting the absence in a vessel built from the remnants of the throne. He spent his years recording what had happened, not as scripture, but as testimony. His voice, old and trembling, filled the silence of his dying ship. "He was never a god," he whispered into the recorder, "only a man who bore our worship until it broke him. And she was never salvation, only the part of us we feared to remember. Sometimes when the void was quiet, he heard them. Not as words, but as warmth, a presence that felt like sunlight through glass. It was not command. It was not promise. It was simply being. And in those moments Aurelian wept, not from sorrow, but from the unbearable beauty of knowing that even gods could love, and in loving could end. Far beyond him, in the warp that was no longer chaos but dreaming, the twin lights pulsed faintly, heartbeat and echo, gold and crimson, forever entwined. Demons no longer screamed there. They whispered hymns in languages no mortal tongue could shape. The Imperium had become something new, something vast and still. Where madness once festered, now grew gardens of memory, blooming in colors unseen by the eyes of flesh. On the world of Sindara 9, the heart beneath the earth continued to beat. The planet, once a wasteland, now blossomed with forests of glass and rivers that glowed faintly in the night. The people who lived there no longer built temples or cathedrals. They built halls of remembrance, silent, empty spaces where one could feel the hum of the world and remember that divinity had once walked among them, and that it had left something behind, the capacity to love despite the void. In the archives of the Mechanicus, deep beneath what remained of Mars, a single data crystal survived. Its binary inscription read, "The machine god was human. The human was divine." No one dared interpret it. The priests placed it within a sealed reliquary and prayed not to understand, but to preserve. For understanding had cost them everything once before. Among the stars, the fleets of man learned to navigate by instinct. Captains swore they could feel the pull of something gentle, guiding them unseen. They called it the breath of the two, a current that flowed through void and soul alike. Some said it was faith reborn, others said it was simply the echo of unity, that in the end humanity had remembered how to listen to itself. And so centuries passed, or perhaps moments. Time no longer obeyed its own laws in the scar where Terra had been. Some claimed to see the outline of a world there, flickering in and out of existence, a world of light and shadow, forever reborn, forever dying. Scholars argued whether it was illusion or miracle. Pilgrims simply knelt and whispered thanks, not knowing why. Aurelian's body failed him at last. Alone aboard his vessel, surrounded by the relics of an age that had devoured itself, he looked upon the void and smiled. He thought of the countless soldiers who had died screaming in his name. He thought of the priests who had burned for faith and the heretics who had burned for doubt. He thought of the billions who had prayed, not for glory, but for warmth in the cold. And he understood finally that none of it had been in vain. For every act of devotion, every moment of despair, every whisper of hope had led to this: silence and peace. He turned off the ship's systems, letting the cold creep in. Before the end, he spoke one final line into the recorder. If they became one, it was not to rule, but to rest. And if we endure, it will not be through worship, but through memory. The engines went dark. The stars watched, impassive, eternal. His body drifted, weightless, until the light of the vanished world reflected upon his armor. Faint gold, faint crimson. His eyes closed, and for the briefest instant, the void itself seemed to bow in respect. 1,000 years later, children would look to that patch of sky and see a faint shimmer where no star should be. Some called it the ghost of Terra, others the heart of the Emperor. The old songs returned, quieter now, sung not in cathedrals but around fires. The words changed with each generation until none remembered where they came from. Only that they spoke of two lights, two hearts, and the price of remembering what it meant to be human. Perhaps that was the true ending. Not salvation, not doom, but remembrance. Humanity had outlived its gods, and in doing so had become something both smaller and greater. Not divine, not damned, simply aware. And maybe that awareness was enough. Perhaps the Emperor and the Mother were never meant to rule eternity, but to teach it, to show that even in a universe built on war, love could exist long enough to end it, And perhaps that is the cruelest, most beautiful truth of all, that peace is not given, but earned through the ruins of faith. If the stars could speak, perhaps they would ask, what becomes of a species that has outlived its own gods? And what do gods become, once they have loved humanity too deeply to survive it? The void does not answer. It never has. It only listens. And in its infinite quiet, something still hums, the heartbeat of what once was and what might be again. The pulse of two lights intertwined across eternity, fading not into death, but into memory. A cathedral without walls, a prayer without words, a silence that remembers, and somewhere, between one breath and the next, the galaxy continues. If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe to Stories of the Imperium Pro. Your voice keeps the echoes alive. Tell us in the comments, what do you think remains when even gods fall silent?